So from time to time, I will have an illustration made up for me, or something to help me illustrate a point. And I did not plan that this week, but God gave me an illustration. He gave me a man cold. So guys in the room, you understand how devastating a man cold can be. And it's really bad when you're an extrovert like I am, because I've been in timeout all morning, like sitting in the corner, not able to communicate with you all. But I learned a lesson a few years back. The winter of 2015, 2016, I ended up getting really sick because I didn't slow down. My wife and I and 14 other adults had just started a new church in a community that needed a church. And so we started a church, and we got through our first Christmas season, and it was just busy. I mean, there was just so much going on. And we were a set-up, tear-down church where we rented a middle school, and so we had a set-up and tear-down team. And, of course, in the early days of the church, there weren't enough people. And so I was on pretty much every team. And so I was getting there early and offloading this big trailer that we had and hooking up equipment and getting things set up, and I got a man cold, and I kept going and pushing through, and I got through the holiday season, and in January, all of a sudden, I just wasn't getting better. So I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Oh, we want to send you to get a chest X-ray," and come to find out, I had walking pneumonia, and so I had to slow down. I had to stop. I had to rest. In addition to having this young church, I had a young family, and so when I wasn't busy with stuff at church, and I come home, and I wanted to be present for my family, present for my wife and for my kids, and I just kept going and going and going. You might be here today going, I can relate to that. I feel like there's so much to do, and there's not enough time, and especially this time of year, there seems to be so much more to do. It's a time where we're supposed to be remembering and celebrating the coming of Jesus, but oftentimes there's new things that get added to our plate and new expectations. And they're not necessarily expectations that other people put on us. Sometimes they're expectations that we put upon ourselves. And so we get busier and busier and busier. The truth about us is that we're not infinite. Although we're created in the image of God, we are not infinite. We are finite. We are not all-powerful. We are not all-knowing. We are not ever-present. God is. We're created in His image, but we're not those things. We have limited power. That means that we can't do everything, and we need to learn to ask for help. We're not all-knowing. Even though we live in the information age, and we can Google pretty much any question that we might have, or look on YouTube and learn how to do all sorts of different things, we don't know everything. And we can't be in all places at all times. Although we find sometimes this pressure to be everywhere. Sometimes it's put on us by ourselves. Sometimes it's put on us by the expectations of others. We are not infinite, even though God put this desire for eternity in our hearts, forever in our hearts. The problem with that is there's only one thing that can satisfy that desire. It's God. Yet we look to all sorts of other things to try to satisfy that desire that only God can meet. And so what happens is we try to fill our lives with more things and more experiences and more activities, and we wear ourselves out. If we try to meet our needs in our own strength, we're going to wear ourselves out. If we try to meet our needs by looking to other people, then we're going to find ourselves getting disappointed. And so we grow restless, always looking for that next thing. We grow anxious and experience anxiety because we're worried that we're not going to be enough or have enough. We grow disillusioned because the more that we put our hopes in all these other things, the more we're let down. We become depressed. And we find ourselves living at this hurried pace where we can't really enjoy anything. A number of years ago, I read a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And in that book, the author, John Mark Comer, wrote this: "This is exacerbated by our cultural moment of digital marketing from a society built around twin gods of accumulation and accomplishment." In other words, we live in a society that is about getting more. And we live in a society that's about achieving more, experiencing more, adding more to our resume, more to our life's experiences. He continues on, he says, advertising is literally attempting to monetize our restlessness. They say we see upwards of 4,000 ads a day. Wrap your mind around that. 4,000 ads a day, all designed to stoke the fire of our bellies. Buy this, do this, eat this, drink this, have this, watch this. And I think at this time of year, the volume's turned up on all those things. The volume's turned up that if we watch this movie, you got to see this movie, it's coming out, it's going to change your life, it's going to help you escape. Oh, we've got to buy this thing. This is the toy that the kids have to have. If they don't have this, they're not going to have a good Christmas. This is the thing that the person needs to have in their life. You got to eat this. You got to do this. And it's not just the marketing companies. He continues on. He says, social media takes this problem to a whole new level as we live under the barrage of images, not just from marketing departments, but from the rich and famous, as well as our friends and family, all of whom curate the best moments of their lives. So what ends up happening is we compare what we don't have, or we compare our boredom, or we compare our moment of insecurity or our moment of not having something with the best curated moments of someone else's life. Their best experiences. They're sharing something that's a highlight. They're not sharing everything with us, and so we're comparing our lives to their highlight. And we find ourselves feeling unsatisfied. This leads to feeling less contentment and more pressure to fill our lives with items and experiences and activities. And so we grow more and more restless. Our restlessness, our hurry ends up crowding out the most important relationships in our lives. It crowds out our relationship with God. It'll crowd out our relationship with our family. It'll crowd out our relationship with our friends. It'll even crowd out our health if we're not careful. Pushing. Always trying to get more. Instead of being present with the people that we're near, we're looking at the lives of what other people are experiencing, and we're finding ourselves less content. This is not a new problem. This overcrowdedness is not a new problem. It's a problem that's been going on for a long time. And it's a problem that we can even see in the Christmas story. In Luke chapter 2, starting in verse 1, it says, "In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And everyone went to their own town to register." So Bethlehem is this tiny town, and it didn't have the infrastructure to have this massive people coming back to the area. Imagine our area. Imagine if all of a sudden there was a government mandate that people that were from our area had to come back to our area to register for something. It wouldn't just be the people who live here who are here, but it would be people coming from all sorts of other places that have moved away. The towns in this area could not hold all the people that are coming. Bethlehem was overcrowded. Verse 4, it says, "So Joseph also went up to the town from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to be registered with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths, and she placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them." So we know that this wasn't any ordinary baby that was born. This is the Messiah, the one that all of Israel was waiting for, the one that God had promised hundreds of years earlier, that they were waiting for him to come and deliver them. Yet no one made room for Jesus. When I read this story, I ask questions that can't really be answered by looking at what's there. But these are some of the questions that I ask myself when I read this story. Why didn't anyone help that couple? Why didn't anyone help that couple? Did they notice the need that this man came to town and his wife was extremely pregnant and they had no place to go? Or were they so wrapped up in their own busyness, trying to meet their own needs, that they failed to see the need of this couple that came to town? Joseph's family. Joseph's family would have been there. He was from Bethlehem. His family was from Bethlehem. So they either still lived in town or there were other family members who were coming to town too. How come they didn't help Joseph and Mary? How come they didn't say, hey, you can crash with us, you could stay with us? How come they didn't help them out? Was it because of the scandal that was around this pregnancy? That they knew that Mary was extremely pregnant and that Joseph and her weren't married and Joseph wasn't the father? Is that why they didn't reach out and help? Oftentimes, we can justify being uncaring by sitting in judgment of somebody else. Going, yeah, you know what? You reap what you sow. They made their bed, they've got to lie in it. They're in that problem, they're in that situation, and there's nothing I can do about it. So we justify it. We crowd out this command that God gave us to love our neighbor by sitting in judgment of them. Well, we don't know. We don't know why Mary and Joseph didn't have a place to stay. But all we do know is that no one made room for Jesus. They didn't make room for Jesus, and so they missed out on the arrival of the Messiah. They missed out on the one that they were waiting for. They missed out on that celebration. There are many people who missed out on the good news that God had come near. A lot of people missed out on that good news while Jesus walked the earth. They missed out on that good news because Jesus didn't fit in the box that they kind of created for the Messiah. They thought the Messiah was going to be this political leader, that he was going to be the one to come and set the people of Israel free from foreign oppression, that he was going to be the one to, in their day, they thought he would deliver them from the Romans. Yet God had a plan that was so much bigger than their idea of what the Messiah was going to be. They thought the Messiah was going to set them free, but really what Jesus came to do was to set all of humanity free from the oppression and control of sin and the fear of death. See, Jesus, the Messiah, he'd never fit in a man-made box because he's so much bigger. There are people who didn't see Jesus. They missed out on the Messiah because he didn't fit into their life. Because they made their life about what they could get. They made their life about achieving more status. They made their life about pleasure and the pursuit of pleasure. So he didn't fit into their life. They wanted to be in charge. They wanted to be the leader and the controller of their own destiny rather than submit themselves to Jesus as Lord. Listen to what it says in John chapter 1, starting in verse 10. He, talking about Jesus, was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own people, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of a human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. People didn't make room for Jesus. Even though he created everything, they didn't make room for Jesus. Yet the good news is that when we do make room for Jesus, when we say, Jesus, I'm going to get off the throne of my life, and that's your spot. You're going to be leader. You're going to be Lord. That he gives us the right to be called children of God, a daughter of God, a son of God. We're adopted into his family. He's made room for us. Will we make room for him? See, people are still missing out on the celebration of the arrival of Jesus. They're missing out on celebrating Jesus during the Christmas season because they think it's about what they can get or what they can give to others. They think it's about these picture-perfect family experiences. But it's so much more than that. It's so much more than just these temporary experiences or things. It's about celebrating God coming near to us. It's about celebrating him coming in the fullness of grace and truth to set us free. We need to make sure We need to make sure that we're not missing out on the good news of God coming near. We need to make sure that we're not allowing our lives to be so crowded that there's no room for Jesus during the season. When Jesus walked the earth, oftentimes he taught in parables, stories. And one of the parables that many people may have heard before was a story about a farmer who was planting seed. And he wasn't just planting seed the way that, you might think of planting seeds. He was broadcasting it. So you went out to the field and he had this big bag that would have seed in it. He would scoop some seed out and he would just cast it out there, indiscriminately casting the seed as he walked, throwing the seed out there. Jesus said that some of the seed, it fell on a path. And as soon as it landed there, birds came and they ate it up. And then some of the seed, it fell on land that was just kind of had shallow soil. There's lots of rocks in there. And right away, those little seedlings started to form, but as soon as the sun got hot, they dried up and they died. Some of the seed, it fell in a place that wasn't really ready for it. There was lots of weeds that was there. And yes, the seedlings, they started to grow, but they never produced fruit because, well, there were all these weeds that took the nutrients away from them. So they can never truly mature or become all that they were supposed to be. Yet some seed, it fell on good soil, and it produced a good crop, a crop that was so much bigger than what had been shared before, so much more than what had been planted into them. Now, Jesus' students, they didn't know what Jesus was talking about. Sometimes we take for granted the fact that we have the explanation of the story. But they heard Jesus share lots of different things, and they lived in an area where there were lots of farmers. They lived in an area where there were lots of people who tended to animals, and Jesus talked about all of these things that they had seen with their own eyes. But they didn't really get what he was trying to teach them. So they asked him, what's that mean? And this is what he said. You can find the explanation in Luke chapter 8, starting in verse 11. Jesus said, this is the meaning of the parable. The seed is the word of God. So it's the good news of God. Those along the path are the ones who hear. And the devil comes and he takes away the word from their hearts so that they may not believe and be saved. You see, the message is given. It's been put out there. And the goal of that message is that people would believe. They would believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that he came into the world to atone for our sins and to invite us into life with him forever. Yet, sometimes that message falls on deaf ears. As soon as it lands, it's scooped away because the path is hard. Listen to what it says in Psalm 10, verse 4. In his pride, the wicked man does not seek God. In all his thoughts, there's no room for God. See, a hard heart is somebody who's going, no, life's about me. It's about what I can get out of it. It's about me being in charge. And sometimes when people hear that they are flawed, they don't want to own up to that. They don't like the idea of someone being greater than them. They don't like the idea of needing to be rescued, needing to be saved. That word saved means to be made whole, to be restored, to be healed, to be rescued. And sometimes in people's pride, they refuse to admit they need to be saved. And as long as we live that way, as long as we live with ourselves on the throne, as long as we live going, you know what, I can get through anything on my own, as long as we're saying, you know what, I'm going to do what I want to do and nobody can tell me what to do, then we're never really going to receive the good news. Verse 13, Jesus said, those on the rocky ground are the ones who receive the word with joy when they hear it, but they have no root. They believe for a while, but in the times of testing, they fall away. There's no depth. Maybe they heard it, but what they heard was only the good parts. And they bought into this idea that if I believe enough, then my life's going to be good. Jesus came to make me comfortable. Jesus came to give me good things. Jesus came to bail me out of the problem I got myself into. And they stop right there. There's no depth to it. They don't allow the word of God to penetrate deeper and remove all the sin, remove all the things and correct them. No, what they've heard is a gospel of comfort, a selfish gospel. This is the problem with the health and wealth gospel that sometimes people proclaim, that if you just believe enough, you can have it. Oh, if you have enough faith, you'll be healed. Well, guess what? Jesus never promised that. Jesus told his disciples, you will experience hardship. He said, you will be persecuted. But he promised he'd be with us. You see, the way we keep ourselves from having this shallow kind of life, this shallow kind of faith that's just about feel-good stuff and what we can get out of it, is making sure that we're making room for Jesus. Not just the blessing he wants to give to us, but Jesus himself. And we make room for him in our everyday life. When life is good, not just in hardship, but in good times. If we make room for Jesus when things are good, then when things get hard, we still have that experience, that relationship with him. And we hold on to him during that hardship. Listen to what it says in Romans chapter 5. It says, therefore, since we have been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we've gained access by faith into grace, in which we now stand. So we've got this relationship with Jesus that we didn't earn, that he's offered to us. We accepted it, we received it, we're living in it. And we boast in the hope of the glory of God. So no, we are praising God for the goodness that he's poured out into us. Not only so, but we also glory in our suffering, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit, who has been given to us. So we have this relationship with God. And during hardship, we hold on to it. And he matures us, he grows us up as we rely on him. Listen to what it says in James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. See, I look at my life and I look at the challenges that I've gone through in my life. And while I would not want to go through them again, I am grateful for them, because they were opportunities for me to grow in my relationship with God. As I relied on him, as I trusted in him to sustain me through hardship, I gained personal experience with God. Not just stories of how God delivered other people, which are great, but personal experiences of how God sustained me and delivered me. See, God can use these hardships to mature us. Don't look at hardships and allow them to just crowd out the good news. Faithfully cling to Jesus during hard times and allow it to deepen your relationship with him. Dolly Parton is credited as saying, storms make trees take deeper roots. If you're going through a storm in life, instead of just having a shallow faith, allow it to draw you deeper into this relationship with God as you rely on him. Verse 14, Jesus said, the seed that fell among the thorns stands for those who hear, but as they go on their way, they're choked out by life's worries, riches, and pleasures, and they do not mature. We need to make sure that we don't let worry or greed or short-term pleasure crowd out the good news that God has come near, that Jesus has come to lead us in a life with him forever. Sometimes in life, we think that our problems are bigger than they really are, or that our problems are only just for us. No, our problems are there. He wants us to turn to him, to trust him. Sometimes we think, no, life's about all that we can achieve and all that we can experience. No, it's more than that. So we can't just pursue a carefree life. No, we need to pursue life, real life, with God each and every day. God cares about you. He cares about your challenges. He cares about the obstacles and the things that you're facing. He cares about you in the midst of all of that. So don't look at these things that you either don't have or the things that you're worried that you're not going to have enough of and say, oh, God's not there for me. No, he's there in the midst of all of it. Listen to what it says in Psalm 55, verse 22. Cast your cares on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. It's a promise that when we have these cares, we have these worries, we're to give them to God. And it doesn't say he's going to take it away. No, it says he will sustain us and he'll keep us from being shaken. That he will bring us through these times. So don't allow your worries to crowd out God. No, go to him with your worries. 1 Peter 5 verse 7 says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Don't think for a second that your challenge, your issue, your obstacle in your life is not important to God. It is important to God because you're important to God. Jesus came to set you free from sin, to bring you into life with him now and to forever. So take whatever it is that is causing you worry. Take your wants, take your desires, and cast them before God. He cares about you. Philippians 4 verses 6 and 7 says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. So in other words, that you're supposed to go to God. Don't be anxious. Don't be upset about it. Go to God. Talk to him. Ask him for what you need. But when you do it, thank him. Thank him for what he's already done in your life. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. You need to practice gratitude. You've got to take some time to thank God. When you're talking to him about the things you need in your life, give thanks to him for all that you have. Because when you do that, when you give thanks to God on a regular basis, what happens is those worries, those wants, those desires, they have less control over you. They're not going to drag you down anymore because you recognize how much he has already blessed you with. And you recognize that the one who's blessed you with all this, he's not going to leave you high and dry. No, he's going to see you through whatever challenge it is. Verse 15, Jesus said, but the seed on good soil stands for those with a noble and good heart, who hear the word, retain it, and by persevering produce a crop. Notice it says by persevering. That doesn't mean just because it's on good soil that there still aren't hard times. No, hard times will come, but you held on to the word. You continued to believe. You continued to hold on to him. And through all of that, he produces a harvest. He produces a crop in your life. Now, sometimes people say, oh, it's talking about, this is somebody who they stay faithful and they share the message and now more people come to know Jesus. Well, yes, that's true, but it's kind of a byproduct. The fruit, the crop that's being talked about here in that good soil is the fruit of the Spirit. Galatians 5:22 and 23 says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance. Forbearance means patience in the midst of adversity. Kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. This is what is going to grow in your life if you make room for Jesus. This is what's going to grow in your life if you stay connected to him. These things will grow in your life, and guess what? Nobody's going to have a problem with that. There's no law against these things. As a matter of fact, when people see someone who is loving, when people see someone who has joy in their life and peace in their life and is patient and kind and good and faithful and gentle and self-control, not chasing after vices, you know what? They want to be around that person. They want to know, how can I have that in my life? It gives you the opportunity to share with others the good news that Jesus has come, that God has come near to us. So I ask you this question: how can you make room for Jesus this Christmas season and every day throughout the year? Because it's not just about Christmas, it's every day. How can you do it? The first thing is to schedule time to love God, love your neighbor, and love yourself. Really schedule it. Put it on the calendar. Make it a part of your daily practices. Schedule time. I shared with you before, early on, as I was developing this spiritual discipline of spending time talking to God and reading the Bible, that I attached it to meal times because I don't miss many meals. I have breakfast with Jesus. So I'm eating my breakfast, I read, and I pray. Spend time with him at lunch. Spend time with him before I go to bed. I connect with him. I rely on him. Get out your calendar, get out your planner, and make sure that you're blocking out time to love God and to love the people in your life. That you're blocking out uninterrupted time with your family, the people closest to you. I have one of my friends, his name's Matt. His grandpa is a pastor that God used to kind of build two really big churches. One in Southern California, and then he retired when he was 66, and he moved to Missouri, and he was just going to be kind of this circuit preacher, kind of helping pastors who needed to take a break or stepping as an interim from time to time. And when he was 66, a church said, hey, we want you to be our senior pastor. He's like, no, you want somebody young? He's like, no. They said, no, we want you. And he stayed there. And eventually at 82, he said, I'm retiring. Ben's still with us today. I think he's 95 or 96. Still goes and preaches revivals. I remember one day when I was sitting with my friend Matt and his grandpa, Ben, Ben told us a story about a nail in the door. He said one day he came home from work and his son Mike, who was Matt's dad, had painted the front door. And the first thing he did, he walked in the house, he went into the garage, he went and got a nail, and he put the nail back in the door because there had been a nail in the door. And Mike said, Dad, I just painted the door. Why are you putting the nail in the door? It's not even near Christmas. Like, I know you put a nail there to hang a wreath on the nail, and it's not near Christmas. Like, it's in the middle of summer. And he said, Mike, that nail isn't there just for a wreath. Every day when I come home, all the things that I experienced in ministry, all the things I experienced in the office, I see that nail, I hang it on the nail. And I tell God, you've got the night shift. I'm going to leave this here. I'm going to go inside so I can be a husband, so I can be a dad, so I can be present with God, not with an agenda, not with a laundry list of things that I need him to do, but I can just be. I remember hearing that story. It impacted me. Every house that we've lived in, from hearing that story, I find a spot where there'll be a visual cue to me to remember. Hang it there. God's got the night shift. Hang it there. He's in control. You see, we've got to make time. We've got to shut down and make time and trust that God's got it. We've got to learn to be still before God. Come before God, not because of what he can give you, but because of who he is, and just be in his presence. Second thing you can do to make room for Jesus is to practice gratitude. The summer of 2018, there were so many things going on, and I remember that I was having a hard time going to sleep. I was having a hard time turning my brain off. And so I got a notepad out, and instead of writing down all the things that I was concerned about or worried about or needed to do or the conversations that needed to be had later on, because those things always tend to come up right as you lay down. On that notepad, I wrote down all the things I was thankful for. I said, God, thank you for my wife. Thank you for my kids. Thank you for health. Thank you for this church I'm a part of. And I just listed until I ran out of things to give him thanks for. And then I went to sleep. And I began having this practice, and this practice of expressing gratitude to God before I went to sleep got me to a place where I had so much peace. And the amazing thing happened, God still took care of everything else. So practice gratitude, make space for him. The last one, and this is probably the most challenging, is practice a day of rest, also known as a Sabbath. Someone asked me about Sabbath last week. And I was like, well, this is coming up. But it's simply a day of rest. It was given to the people of Israel. It was a gift. Yes, it's a command. They were supposed to learn something about it, but it was a blessing. It was a gift. It was something that distinguished God from all the other things that people worshiped. That you could truly rest in him. It's a day of rest, a rest from working, a rest from doing your normal job, a rest from worrying, a rest from wanting. It's a day of worshiping God, enjoying your family, and doing things that recharge you. John Mark Comer wrote this about Sabbath. He says it takes planning and preparation. It takes self-control, the capacity to say no to a list of good things so that you can say yes to the best. But Sabbath is the primary discipline or practice by which we cultivate the spirit of restfulness in our lives as a whole. You have permission to say no. I think we all need to hear that, but I know there's some people in this room that need to hear that a lot. You have permission to say no. You have permission to say, no, I cannot do that right now. You have permission to say, no, I cannot do that, I need to do this. You have permission to say no. You have permission to block out time to be with your family. You have permission to block out time to be by yourself with God. You have permission. God gave it to us. You can and you should turn off your phone from time to time. I know that we got them in our pockets or our purses, or they're always nearby. You have permission to turn off your phone. It's okay to turn off your phone. You have permission to get off of social media. It's good for you to take a break from being bombarded with these images. You have permission to be present with God, not because of anything he can give you, but because of who he is. Just be in his presence. He's not expecting you to do anything for him. He doesn't need anything from you. Just be present with him. You have permission to be present with your family. You have permission to just be present with your own thoughts and feelings. Say yes to time with God. Say yes to time with the people closest to you. Say yes to activities that energize you. Say yes to slowing down and say yes to resting. See, God came near to us. He came near to us because he wants us to live with him now and forever. Listen to this. We don't have a slide for this one. But listen to what Jesus said to his disciples in John chapter 14, starting in verse 2. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I am going to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. Jesus has made room for you. He's made room for you. Will you make room for him?